Good morning. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming back. So basically, this is going to be a big curriculum briefing. We have school-wide field briefing topics as an attempt to increase consistency, fill in our most compelling training needs, and learn together. Program supervisors act as cross-pollinators, like literally around the world. When they talk to one instructor team at a time, instructor teams go out and practice and experiment and do some really cool things. And then P-Soups can talk to other I teams and say, hey, Janie tried this. It worked really well. Kevin tried this thing and it didn't work that well. I don't know, you might try it. What that lets us do is learn faster as a global team. And right now we're in the middle of a school-wide briefing conversation about strengthening our habits of culture around feedback. So what? We're talking about feedback right now between members of an instructor team. And where I'm hoping that we're going through these conversations is a stronger culture of feedback, better habits, that support on-the-job learning. So what we learned in our training review, and I'll get to that in a second, is that the IC is great, but where people really learn is once they start working courses. So on-the-job learning right after your IC and throughout your entire career. We're talking about peer and supervisor feedback in the field, but where I'm really hoping that we're ending up here is a system that feels like I-team feedback, program supervisor, supervision, and field staffing office supervision interact well together. They do interact remarkably well together, but I think they can interact better. So we finished 2 years ago this expedition training review, faculty training review. It included 372 survey participants and roughly 300 interviewees. Raise your hand if you were one of those. Wow, that's not that many people. Interesting. So thank you for folks who participated. That's capturing a lot of voices. And we identified 14 opportunity areas. And 2 of those were umbrella topics that superseded any specific issue. And culture feedback was one of them. It was everywhere in interviews and surveys. But it was really hard to pinpoint. When we started prototyping solutions, we didn't get very far. Everyone we talked to was like, oh, I definitely know what you're talking about. But like, I don't know how you fix that. So listening to people's comments, we have a conflicted culture of feedback. People talk about being at Knowles because of the culture of learning. Like I came here, I thought I was going to spend a year or two, and I just stayed because I kept learning. Or I just stayed because of the amazing culture here of people admitting when they're wrong and talking about things that they're working on. People leave and say, like, Knowles is just a really unique and special place, as I have never seen anything like it again in terms of feedback and supervision. But then we also talk about, I've observed a culture of avoiding the difficult feedback that we have to give each other. And sometimes it's like clearly something that would impact student outcomes. So why is it that even though we deeply value feedback in learning, we still don't give important feedback at times? So we hear different stories, and I invite you to just listen to these and kind of hold them lightly as like possible contributors, because part of us doing this is assessing, like, what's the thing we're trying to change, and why is it happening? Is it because most of us don't come from environments where feedback is often and well delivered and we don't have good tools? Is it because we don't emphasize coaching and feedback when we promote course leaders? Is it because work is scarce and we don't want to limit work options for our peers? We ran across this topic online when we were doing the review called the paradox of excellence. So how that plays out is it that we so value excellence that we're fearful when we aren't perfect? And after Jesse's talk yesterday, I'm thinking, is the paradox of excellence like a white culture thing? Are we estimating how difficult it is to give feedback across power difference? Is it just because my I-team just made me coffee and breakfast every morning when it was cold and helped me when my course was the hardest? And like, why would I tell something mean at the end? So this is what we've done so far with our briefing topics. We're in a 12-month cycle, and we spent September to December trying to keep it real simple. We talked about I-team check-ins. We talked about when to do them, how to do them, but mostly just do them. People were totally receptive to the idea and agreed, yes, if we commit to doing I-team check-ins, it's probably going to help the situation. We want to help the situation. We'll probably get better results. Not everyone pulled it off, and that's super normal for new briefing topics. And we did a lot more I-team check-ins than we have in the last few years. And then the conversation in briefings just naturally evolved into a different conversation, which was why is it that sometimes, despite having good structure for checking in, I still don't give feedback that I think is important? So in January to May, program supervisors shifted the conversation, and we kept talking about I-team check-ins, and we also started having an intentional conversation or different conversations about what's challenging for us about giving feedback. So I believe, and this is one of those cross-pollinations, we're bringing those conversations together. I'm going to give you some ideas of things people have been talking about, a few other ideas. You all are going to have some pair and share moments, so thank you. Be ready for that. And then a lot of you all are going to go and in the next few months be involved in briefings. These school-wide briefing topics are not a drop and listen. They're designed so that you can be part of the same conversation 2 times, sometimes 8 times over a summer, or over a year or a season. And the concept is that it's different every time. It'll be different today because you're sitting in this group thinking through these ideas with this group of people. When you show up at your briefing, you're going to sit down with your I-team and say, we're giving each other feedback. How are we going to do that? And then you'll sit down with another I-team, and it'll be a different conversation. And you'll say, we're giving each other feedback. How do we want to do that? And you learn different lessons in each conversation. And together, we build habits. We build culture. We talk about, hey, we've been saying this about feedback for years, and it's actually not working for us. Or we've been saying this about feedback for years, and if we shift it a little bit, it'll work better now. So I think we can address this with a combination of technical and adaptive strategies. And I'm not going to talk that much about this. We talk a bunch about technical and adaptive in FADS. We're talking about it more in the IC. But the idea is that technical means we can access expertise for tools. And adaptive means something different, that we have to experiment and adapt together. So this morning we're going to do both. So technical solutions. Experts can help us with this. Sometimes we're the experts. I-team check-ins, they matter. And there's a formula that works. They're better when they're predictable and regular, both in scheduling and ideally in format. So for example, maybe your I-team has a check-in in the first 3 days of a course. And if you're working a 3-week course, or a 4-week course, you have one every week after that. People know it's coming. And ideally, they know what the questions are going to be. So say in your briefing, you've sat down and said, these are the questions that we're going to talk about. So when I'm not just shooting from the cuff, I can actually put some thought into the conversation that we're going to have in 3 days. And you want the questions to cover 3 topics. I-team check-ins can go down a totally different road. You can have real nice conversations about your plan for tomorrow, but they're not hitting these 3 things. You want to talk about how the team's doing. You want to talk about individual growth. And you want to make sure there's some room in there for people to easily address, stop and fix issues. I think this is happening on our team. I think we need to talk about it. So Julia, you say, but I like my check-ins to be more organic and ongoing. It feels really natural to me and it works great. And I say, awesome. If you're checking in with your team and you're asking your team, are you all getting what you need? Are we having conversations that feel like enough to you? Are we having conversations that are addressing iTeam? Are we having conversations that are hitting everybody's individual development? Because sometimes when we have a course leader thinking they have this really nice organic system, we get to the end of the course and hear patrol leaders saying, like, we really think we needed to be checking in more often. And two-person iTeams sometimes just chat every day, and they do this just fine. All right, those are iTeam check-ins. Simple, important. Role model. Are you openly talking about mistakes, things that you're working on, small and large successes that you are proud of? I am proud that I didn't have to cancel this presentation after getting knee surgery. I just am. I lose my water bottle a lot in the first 2 days of field courses. I haven't gotten my system down. And I make sure to tell students that. Hey, I can't find my water bottle. Has anybody seen it? I'm trying to get my systems in play. Show your students you're confused about where you are on the map. We do this. This is the stuff people love about working at Knowles. As much as you are not perfectly role modeling outdoor skills, you're doing far more to create a culture of learning. And ask your peers for feedback. It feels really different to work with people who are actively soliciting feedback than are not. And be specific. It's way easier to answer a specific question than like, how am I doing? Anybody have feedback for me? So like things like, hey, can you think of a way that I can connect better to George or challenge him better? Anything you're hearing in student check-ins that might help me do my job better? This is particularly important if you're the most experienced person on your team or if you're the course leader. Okay. Situationally aware feedback. This could mean a ton of different things, but I'm going to use it to mean something really specific. In your iTeam, understand who the people are and where they are in their careers. So new instructors. New instructors are the people who say they learn the most from peer and supervisor feedback in the field. Do more one-on-one check-ins. Don't do all of your feedback for new instructors in your whole iTeam check-in. Check in with people before and after classes or debriefs. This can be course leaders, but it can also be peers. Ask new instructors what they want feedback on. Wilderness medicine has a whole preceptor system to support people in their first couple of courses. It's fantastic. They work with those folks differently. So do more one-on-one feedback. Don't correct new instructors' classes in front of students. Hard work with these folks is a huge multiplier. Second group, people who are learning how to course lead. This doesn't have to be on the course where someone's getting assessed to CL, but like recognize when somebody's moving into that zone of learning how to be a course leader. This comes up for us as a big theme of inconsistency and opportunity. Figure out how to target your feedback conversations to the things that this person's working on for their CL skills. Like, is it emergency response? Is it student behavior? Is it mentoring skills? Make a plan with your PSUB during the briefing. And then our last one is tools. There are better and worse ways to give and receive feedback. Fact. Practice makes you better. Learn any new tool. There's a lot of them out there. I really liked Dave's presentation yesterday. I went through my notes and realized I didn't write the word down, but I really liked his concept. I think he was talking about track splitting. Allison Berg last year gave 2 presentations at the summit about feedback. They're on videos. She's got some really good stuff in there. There are some tools that your program supervisors will have in briefings this summer. And then here are 2 simple concepts that might be helpful for you. I've been thinking a lot in the last couple of years of like, how does what we know about feedback and conflict and systems of repression like work together. And I think I'm in a place anyway where I'm having to like shift how I'm thinking about those things. And I'm just like figuring out little pieces that are helping me there. So quick story. My friend Allison Berg, who talked last year, she gives me regular feedback. She usually asks first, and I always say yes, because she gives me good feedback. And we have this semi-pattern that I've learned some things from. So here's a super minor example. We're at a restaurant. We don't see each other that often. Let's say we're at the Cowfish, and I'm like, really, I want to focus on us hanging out. Someone comes up, and I'm like, okay, this could take a little while. Let's try to not make it happen that way. And the person leaves, and she says, you know, when that person interrupted our dinner, you told me that you didn't want to talk to him for very long. But it got long because you kept asking him questions. And to me, this doesn't feel that simple, so I start asking her more questions about it. And I think she's going to explain it in a different way and give me some new ideas about it. And then she will just explain it the same way again. And she'll say something like, I observed that you kept asking him questions, and I think that's why he stayed here. I thought that observation might be useful to you. So I get 2 lessons out of this. The first one is, do I know my boundaries of how much I want to talk about this feedback after I give it to somebody? Like, how much am I willing to explain this if the person's having a hard time understanding it? How much am I willing to help them through an emotionally challenging time accepting the feedback? And you should know that. I think it helps to know that going into feedback. There's no right answer. Different circumstances are different. But what Allison's doing there is gently letting me know, like, I don't want to process this with you. I put work into making the feedback simple and clear, and that's it. That's all there is. So I think where this translates pretty commonly for us is if you tell me that I just did something racist and that's hard for me to hear, I should not hear that as an invitation for support and coaching. If you want to offer that, great. But I've heard people a fair amount in the last year say something like, I just feel like I gave this person this feedback and now I have to help them because it's my fault. Like, it's my fault now that they're dealing with this thing, and it's not. They did something. You observed it. You gave them some feedback to try to help them. Brené Brown talks about boundaries going hand in hand with compassion. I love that. So if you give me a piece of feedback and I keep wanting to talk about it, and you give me a gentle boundary or a real clear boundary, ironically, if you cut me off, it might be easier for you to deliver that feedback to me with compassion. Okay, so going back to my story, lesson 2. Is my intent good? I check my own intent before delivering feedback, and I think that that makes me more effective. Any feedback tool, no matter how good it sounds, can either do good or be used as a weapon. So Allison said, I had this observation that I think might be useful to you. If she had said that, but really what it was that she was just super annoyed that this person was at our table for so long and she just needed to say something, that would have felt really different. And probably would have been confusing for me. So say I want to tell a co-instructor that I think that they just undermine the confidence of one of our students. This is something that can get me pretty upset and angry sometimes. And I've learned, for me, that I'll give more effective feedback if I stop and check in with my intent on that. Like, really, am I, in this moment, giving this person feedback to help them be a better instructor? Or am I frustrated and I'm trying to knock them down a little bit? And if I recognize that I'm actually trying to knock them down, can I just like take a moment and shift that? And remember what my bigger goal is? So I'm using this example on purpose because I see us a lot talking about how emotion fits with delivery of feedback. And I think what I just said about checking my intent is different than telling someone to calm down. I've been thinking a lot about this and trying to like check, is this just like a politeness thing that's maintaining power dynamics? But I think it's different. Either way, I might be upset and angry. And in either case, I might voice that I'm angry. But my experience is that in one case, I'm just like venting anger and like spreading anger towards someone. And in the other one, I just get better results. And what I think that looks like is just taking a moment to remember, like, okay, I'm doing this to help this person, or I'm doing this to help our relationship. Because feedback ultimately is about a relationship. So I might say something like, hey, I just got pretty worked up and I'm kind of angry because I just saw you cutting off Sandra in front of her hiking team. She's been having trouble. We've been talking a lot in one-on-one check-ins. She's not feeling confident in the group. And I think from her body language that you might have just reinforced that. I'm telling you this because I think it'll help you as an instructor, and it also might help Sandra if you check in with her. Okay. All right. So boundaries, check my intent in the moment. Okay, we're going to do a pair and share. So pick somebody next to you, and we're going to spend about 10 minutes. Can you all see that little technical solutions box? No? Well, take some quick notes. I'll read it. Oh, yeah, will that help? Yeah, can you not see it because it's blurry, or can you not see it because it's blocked? Too small? Great. All those things. Oh my God. Somebody fix that. Thank you. And I'll just tell you real quick, just a reminder, the 4 different technical solutions that you are going to be talking about or choose from are iTeam check-ins, feedback tools, role modeling, and situationally aware feedback. I switched the order on the other slide, so this one's a little funny. So what's one question you have about one of those 4 things, and how might you use one of these to help you on your next course? 10 minutes. Wow, nice. Yeah, totally impressive. Group sync. All right, so one clue that you're working with an issue that's got adaptive elements is that you try a bunch of technical solutions and you don't fix the problem. Technical solutions are still part of the solution. But the difference with adaptive challenges is you can't fix adaptive challenges, you just address them. So they require all of us to experiment and learn together, and what that looks like is you try something and you wait and see. So on your iTeam, you do an experiment. You think like, I've never had this conversation before with an iTeam. Let's try this and see how that changes the dynamic of my team. So here are 2 that folks have been experimenting with, and then one I'm going to add. First one is exploring power dynamics. So what this looks like is having a conversation with your team, exploring potential power dynamics that we have, and how might those impact our feedback exchange, and what can we do to mitigate them. These are way easier to address if you've talked about them in the beginning of your course. So CL, PL, I dynamics. Social power like race and gender. I worked a course recently in a 2-person team, and we had a conversation in the beginning about like what's it like for a new instructor working with the education director. And for him, that was super helpful. We also got into a situation where we ended up with issues that like intertwined with sexism, and I really wished that we had talked in the briefing about like what do you 2 do when sexism comes up for you 2 as a team. That would have helped me. Other ones are field weeks, experience in a technical activity. These are all reasons sometimes we don't give feedback. And having these conversations, iTeams are starting to see a shift in openness and vulnerability. So I think that's neat to see what that might do for us. Second one is equity and inclusion feedback. So we are absolutely, right now, experimenting with giving and receiving equity and inclusion feedback within our iTeams. It's clumsy. Sometimes it's turning into deep friendships, growth, and like really cool levels of satisfaction. And sometimes our conversations are turning into huge messes and get complicated really fast. So I'm really looking forward in the next couple of years to hearing what's working better, both on the deliverers and receivers end. And for now, I just want to offer you this experiment. Because I think that it's important to recognize that these topics are like class 5 boating. This is like, especially for me, a good metaphor because I'm not a boater. But I think that the important thing is to shoot for these feedback exchanges being really simple. So for the teller, I would like to give you this feedback to help you. Here is a simple description. This is the best I can do. I think your actions contributed to a sexist environment on our course. These are the actions. There are a couple of examples. I'm trying to help you. This is the best I can do. On the receiver's end, thank you for telling me that. And then maybe just stop. Or you might add, like, hey, I'm going to sit on this for 24 hours. Or, hey, can I ask you a few questions that help me understand what you're talking about, but it'll be less than 10 minutes long. So I don't know if this will help you or not, and it's unrealistic to think it's always going to play out this way. But it's just too easy to go down a process of defensiveness or verbal processing that totally undermines the exchange. Right now, some of our exchanges are just wearing us out. And the exchanges are becoming bigger equity and inclusion missteps than the initial action was. So if you're finding yourself, when you're finding yourself responding with things like, I don't agree that was homophobic, or you aren't giving me this feedback very well, or like, let me just tell you how hard this is for me to hear right now. Those are not helping. So let's go back to the, thank you for telling me that. Number 3, collaborative hiring process. This one's mine, and I have a feeling if we figure out how to talk about this differently, it'll get us somewhere. So we have multiple people and roles that are jointly and loosely participating in a process that results in hiring decisions in a competitive system for work. We don't have enough contracts for the people that want work, and qualified, good people who want work. And it doesn't matter if we are all like perfect at everything in our jobs, there still wouldn't be enough contracts. And we know that this stresses us out, and I'm just curious if there's a different way that we can talk about how that element feeds into particularly I-team feedback exchange. So we're going to go back to pair and share, and you're going to choose one of these 3 questions to talk about. What's an example of a power structure that's made it hard for you to deliver feedback? What's an experiment that you're already making or would like to make in giving or receiving feedback about equity and inclusion? And then I just took a stab starting with this one. Hey, do you pause in giving someone feedback because of scarcity of work? How do you think that's really helping them or not helping them? Okay. What do I do with all this feedback? I have friends who don't work at Knowles who've gone like 10 years without getting any feedback from anybody in their jobs. I just gave somebody feedback on a resume that they wrote, and they were like, this is the most feedback anyone's given me in 10 years. So what a cool thing to be in a position where I'm getting so much feedback that I don't know how to prioritize. Do I sit, reflect on it? Do I do the heavy work of crossing it? Do I burn it up, let it go? So I think this is important to recognize as the receiver and as the deliverer of feedback. None of us can be good at everything. None of us can be trying to get better at everything at the same time. It would keep us from focusing our efforts on a few key things that we want to work on right now that we think are most important. So I'm the only one, and it's my responsibility here as an employee or in my job or as a person to decide, like, where am I going to most productively focus my efforts? And that means I'm not going to do some things. All the feedback is just data to help me understand. What Sam thinks about me is data. What I think about what just happened is data. Second, for us to change culture, my relationship to feedback is ultimately the thing I'll most contribute to our larger culture. Same with everyone here. I have role models who I identify as learners and I want to be like. On my first course lead, I had these two students, Amy and Kate, who were just like constantly laughing together about all the mistakes they were making. And they just like kept getting better. That's what I want to be like. Recently, I've been having an interesting experience that I think is going to help me. So one time that I get defensive to feedback is if I get overloaded at work, I tend to go into this mode of like feeling more and more responsibility. Of like, okay, there's all this stuff to do. And I have a job where there's always more things that we could address. And when I'm in that like pressure mode and I hear feedback, I have this story in my head that just like quickly goes to like, how can I do more? I don't actually know what that's all about, but like we have these like stories and patterns of how we hear feedback. And the feedback might not be about adding anything more. It might just be about doing something different. So those are two things, responsibility and the defensiveness piece. And I've been working on the responsibility thing by like starting out my days thinking like, oh, I want to have an intent to walk through my day and recognize all of the other people who are working with me on these goals. And just notice them and try to like shift that perspective that I know isn't helpful. And one evening I was like, reacting to this piece of feedback and input I got, and I suddenly realized, like those are the people that are trying to help me. Like the people who are giving me ideas that are hard for us as a school to step into or hard for me to figure out are the people who are doing the work to like help take responsibility for making change. And that's like still like, I can like get it sometimes and not get it other times, but I think that's pretty neat. So we're going to wrap up here, but one thing I saw when I program supervising and talking to people about changing was like one of the coolest things I've ever done at Knowles. Watching people get feedback or like get this thing where they're like, I think I want to try this or I think I want to do this, but ultimately I would just see a pattern and I could feel it in myself of like being scared. Because being scared that I might lose something that I really like about me if I turn into something else. And I heard somebody recently talking about shifting in equity and inclusion work and saying like, I'm like afraid I might lose my cultural essence. And that just like really hit me of like, right, of course. And I have never seen anybody be bummed after they moved into something that they were trying to move into. Like, I have just never seen anyone get to the other side of that and think like, oh, I still have my essence. I still have the things that I liked about me before. But it's like hard to step into that space. So I will leave you with one statement. Ray Kramer is a wilderness medicine instructor. He comes to staff meetings every couple of years. He's also an educator of educators. And he gave this line, I think like 10 years ago in a staff meeting about giving feedback to students. And I've always remembered this line, and I think it's a nice closing for you all too. So I offer this with tremendous respect and humility that none of us has all the answers. Thanks for the work you all are doing with feedback. It helps us create really cool student experiences. That's it.